Go behind the scenes with Toronto's busiest trauma units on The Critical Hour. Friday on Discovery Health Channel.
Impact. How much can the human body take? A young boy sets in motion a chain reaction that crushes him under 1,000 pounds of drywall. In an instant, your life can be shattered. Without warning, your body broken, your future left hanging by a thread. Only the heroism of total strangers, cutting-edge technology, and the practice of bold medicine stand between life and death. These are stories of survival, about real people pushed past their limits, lives forever changed by a moment of impact. It's every family's nightmare. A 12-year-old boy playing at a construction site is crushed behind 1,000 pounds of drywall and stops breathing.
Help, Grandpa! Help me, please!
Spencerport, New York, summer 2001. Stephen and his grandfather Mike were best pals. Mike was like a dad to him, since his natural father was not a part of his life. It was early July. Stephen was looking forward to one of his summer traditions, helping with odd jobs for their family-owned construction business.
We went to the site there, and I noticed that morning before we went to lunch together that there was one house that just needed a little bit of sweeping up. I told him to go and clean that up, and in the meantime, I was running my backhoe and doing some lawn work, landscaping.
Inside the house, Stephen began sweeping. Mike also got to work.
I took my machine down the road maybe 500 feet and got a scoop of dirt and came back around, and I could actually see Stephen in the house.
What Mike couldn't see from his vantage point was that Stephen was no longer sweeping. He had wandered over near a stack of drywall. Suddenly, the stack collapsed. The sheets pressed up against Stephen's chest, pinning him against the wall with more than 1,000 pounds of force. With his 4'11", 110-pound frame, Stephen was helpless. Within minutes, his hands and legs began to go numb.
I made a couple of trips. I seen him before I turned around and went back, but he was standing up as far as I could see it.
But Mike could only make out the outline of Stephen's head and shoulders. The sound of the backhoe drowned out Stephen's screams for help.
I could see him in the same position, standing up, and he wasn't moving. I said to myself, that's weird. I thought he was playing a game at first, but I said I better go check him.
Stephen had been trapped for almost 20 minutes.
Went in the house, and he was pinned from the breastbone down with all the weight of the drywall on him. I took all the sheets, and I just pulled them off. And
with the weight of the boards lifted from Stephen's chest, blood rushed back into his lower body, draining the blood from his head. Stephen passed out. Mike immediately called 911 as he checked Stephen's pulse. That's when he realized that his grandson wasn't breathing. He quickly began rescue breathing as he waited for the paramedics to arrive and take over.
There was really no respirations to speak of. There was a lot of gurgling, a lot of noise in the airway. So I immediately opened the airway, gave him a couple breaths with a bag valve mask, and then I put oxygen on him and tried to question him. He moaned a little bit. I was concerned about hidden injuries. Internal injuries are always a problem because we really didn't know how the drywall got on him, but we knew that it had to be a lot of pressure to not allow the lungs to expand properly.
Stephen was taken to Golisano Children's Hospital in neighboring Rochester.
When Stephen was brought in, he was awake, he was conversant. The only markings of physical trauma on him was just a series of abrasions pretty much across the juncture between his abdomen and his chest wall. It looked like a trivial injury.
But knowing that Stephen had been pinned by 10 times his weight, doctors took him for CT scans.
The CAT scanner was our first clue that this was going to be a little more extensive than we had appreciated. Yeah?
The walls of Stephen's intestines were swelling abnormally. This was a bad sign.
Is it in your belly that hurts most?
There was a potential for him to develop the stigmata of crush syndrome.
Doctors worried that the weight of the boards cut off blood flow to Stephen's muscles, causing them to begin to die. The muscles could release toxic chemicals that would destroy Stephen's internal organs. Doctors gave Stephen fluids in an attempt to flush out these toxins and prevent organ failure. But the effects of crush syndrome are very difficult to reverse, and it can take hours for any symptoms to manifest themselves.
They brought us upstairs to the room. I had no idea that we were in intensive care. I had no idea. I just thought that they brought us up to a normal room, that he was going to be watched for the night, and that we would go home the next day.
But as the night progressed, Stephen got worse.
He became confused and agitated as the night wore on. He was retaining more fluid that we were providing to him intravenously, and we were beginning to see a drop in the volume of urine that his body was producing.
This meant that the toxins in Stephen's body were not getting flushed out. Blood tests showed some of these dangerous chemicals at levels 30,000 times higher than normal. These were blatant signs of impending kidney failure. What's more, Stephen's breathing was also becoming labored. Doctors put him on a respirator.
It was just devastating. I just wanted to trade places with him. It's hard for me because I'm the one that took. I'm the one that took him to work.
Stephen was not responding to the medication that doctors were giving to him. They had no choice but to put him on dialysis, a machine that acts like a kidney by cleaning the body's blood. It wasn't working. Stephen's liver began to fail. This could be fatal. The liver performs over 500 functions. Many are essential for survival.
So what we really saw is, very sadly, quite a domino effect.
Doctors feared the toxins would reach Stephen's brain next. So they put him in a medically induced coma. This would slow the brain down and hopefully decrease any damage.
And from that point, they had informed me if they didn't think that he was going to make it through the day.
These guys, like family. So when I learned 1 in 3 men faces prostate problems,
he had to switch to One-A-Day Men's.
One-A-Day Men's, a complete multivitamin plus lycopene, which Harvard studies suggest may help prostate health.
gotta watch out for my guys.
One-A-Day Men's.
Friday at 9 on Discovery Health Channel.
They didn't know exactly how that was going to turn out, if he was even going to live through it. It was going to take a miracle to even get him through this.
When the sheets of drywall fell on Stephen, they came to rest just below his chest. The pressure cut off the blood supply to all areas of his body below this level. The lack of blood caused his muscles to begin to die and to release toxic chemicals. These in turn led to a domino effect of organ failure, beginning with the lungs, then kidneys, liver, and potentially his brain.
With one organ system failing, you probably have close to 50% mortality. If you get 2 organ systems to fail, your mortality goes up to about 75%. With 3 organ systems failing, your mortality goes into the 95 to 98% mortality.
This is really scary, and you saw
The likelihood of Stephen surviving this was really probably in the single-digit percentile.
and he was fully asleep when we did this, so it didn't hurt him at all to do it. And
They were taking it, I believe, like hour by hour. They didn't know what was going to happen next.
Stephen spent his 13th birthday in a coma. His family spent it praying for his recovery. It took almost a month before Stephen's kidneys and liver started to show signs of improvement. But then, Stephen began bleeding profusely from his bowels. On August 7th, doctors took him to the operating room to see if they could find the source of the bleeding. They made a horrible discovery.
And what they found when they opened his abdomen was all this bowel that had so much scarring from so much injury was just one big matted mess.
Doctors couldn't find the source of the bleeding. What's more, Stephen's abdomen was so swollen that they had to leave it open and cover it with sterile bandages.
See if we can get him over. Let's get him back to the unit.
When he came up, I almost passed out because I couldn't even recognize him. He was so swollen.
Overnight, we gave him tons of blood products. We gave him clotting factors. We gave him blood, and we were making no headway. We were just barely treading water, keeping him alive.
By morning, doctors suggested a last-ditch procedure to save his life. Take out his bowels and transplant some new ones. But the radical operation itself could kill him. Stephen's doctors doubted that anything would save him now.
At this point, I think almost all of us had the sense that he was completely up against the wall. We were, in a sense, prepping the family to recognize that this bleeding insult would pose unbelievable odds for his likelihood for survival.
So they called the family into a meeting, and they had said that, you know, the option was there that if we chose to, they would turn the respirator off. I didn't even consider it.
And so, on the 29th day of Stephen's hospitalization, he was taken to the OR. There, doctors would make their best effort to remove his intestines and save his life.
In all honesty, none of us expected him to survive this injury. You would have bet against him, without question.
Transplant surgeon Luis Mieles was called in to perform the risky procedure. He began by taking a biopsy of Stephen's bowel.
During the procedure, I encountered that the colon was perforated in many places, and that was the reason why he was bleeding. So it was clear to me that if I were able to remove the colon, I may be able to succeed in saving this child's life.
Stephen's small intestine was still viable. If Dr. Mieles could remove just the large one, the colon, Stephen wouldn't require a transplant. Dr. Mieles began the procedure, but Stephen was almost gone.
He was so sick and he was bleeding so much that at one point I felt that maybe it was not a right decision to bring him to the OR. Maybe I should have let him go. It looks like everything was going to be an exercise in futility.
We waited and we waited and we waited, and it was very hard for me. The worst experience of my life.
Dr. Mieles finally decided to tell Stephen's family there was nothing more he could do.
They knew that we were not coming up, you know, to give them good news, but there's no preparing that can ever prepare you, you know, for thinking that you're ultimately going to lose your child.
But in the OR, Dr. Mieles changed his mind.
Some inner voice told me, just don't give up and continue.
After 7 hours of surgery, Dr. Mieles achieved the impossible. He successfully removed Stephen's colon. The bleeding stopped. Stephen struggled through weeks of physical therapy. Then, on Halloween Day, 4 months after staring death in the face, Stephen walked out. Everybody called it a miracle.
I consider myself really lucky because, I mean, they said I shouldn't have lived.
As Stephen explained it, his injuries actually occurred when the eager boy was testing his strength by bench pressing the 65-pound sheets of drywall.
There was some drywall leaning up against the wall, and I pulled some off on one side, and then I thought that was pretty easy. So I pushed them back, and then I pulled some more. And as I went to push them back, like 18 or sheets came back and pinned me up against the other wall, and I couldn't move them. I remember trying to push it and trying to slip underneath them, but I couldn't push all over 1,000 pounds. I couldn't push them. After a while, I couldn't feel my legs. My hands started to get numb. I tried to scream for help, but no one heard me. I thought I was gonna die.
Stephen is now a junior in high school who has no physical limitations from the accident.
He's a normal 16-year-old boy, and it is the most beautiful thing in the world to see.